Talking. All right. Okay. So, first things first, before we get into, Micah chapter 1, which we will be in verse 1, we're going to kind of hit it again and then hop into the rest. Just a couple order of business things. First things first. Who all noticed the handouts on the desk there as you walk in? All right. Who wants a handout? All right, raise your hand, and somebody will bring you one. Looks like it'll be Jeff. So, while that is happening, there's also pens if you need one. I did grab a handful of pens and have them back there. If you end up with enough handouts, I can print more after. Don't worry about it. We will get you one. It is just the slides for Micah 1, and a couple of the ones from last week because of the formatting. But it is an order of business type thing. Just had several requests over the week for things I had made for the slideshow or just note-taking tools, that kind of thing. And this was the best thing I could come up with. Anybody want a pen if you don't have one? I think we're all good. Now, so that's first things first. Wanted to provide you those. That's just the content that'll be on the slides tonight. It has spots on there for you to notate. Kind of like I talked about last week. I'm all about helping you. I'm all about serving you. And this was one way I could think of. Way for y'all to follow along as we cover this content, as we talk things. You can write questions, thoughts, ideas, whatever in the margins. You can ask me things. All kind of normal order of business there. The only other thing I'm going to state on this front for just a moment is one thing I do highly, highly recommend with this style of teaching where we're going verse by verse. I recommend you have a physical Bible just because you see the text as a whole. Because we're going to go through it verse by verse, and oftentimes, at least in my personal opinion, a physical Bible is the best way to do that. You focus on the text better. There's not some of the distractions that come with technology. And I feel like it forces you to read the text more. And I'm very opinionated on that. I feel like a physical Bible is the best way to read it. And I recommend that for this class. But with all of that aside, we are going to get into our chief text for tonight. Because, I'm sure all of you who were here last week were aware, we're in Micah. And we got through a whole whopping one verse last week. Because Cade, one, thought he had more time, and two, Cade got really excited because Cade likes Micah. But with that in mind, who wants to take Micah chapter 1, verse 1? Any takers? Yeah. All right. So this is our introduction to the book and to our prophet. Establishes just a handful of key things. Like I said, we covered this a little last time, but we'll walk back through it real quick. First thing first to notice is this prophet's name. Who is like the Lord? It's what the word Micah means. Who is like the Lord? And this is very much an echo, I feel, of Exodus 15, verse 11. That is the song of Moses there after the Exodus. And verse 11, they start that verse, who is like the Lord? And in just a little bit, we'll be in Exodus 15 a little more, because I feel like there's a lot of that type of imagery that plays into this first chapter. But just wanted to highlight that here at the start. Then, this is also setting up several things. Like first, we kind of get, our kings for this time period, which help us then establish the dating of this book. So with the three kings mentioned there and everything, get you somewhere from 740 to 690 with how those guys overlap and what we know. About 50 years. I think I said this way last week, but I'll take that. 50 years to kind of get me an idea of when all this is taking place, when Micah would have been around. That's pretty good in my opinion. And then the final detail I put up here is Morsheth, where Micah's from. I want you to notice the proximity it is to Jerusalem. This site is 20 to 25 miles away. So Micah's not a stranger to the capital of Judah. He is very close. We would consider this driving distance. Some of you may have driven more than this to get here tonight, even. This is something of relevance, especially with how he's going to be speaking to the nations. So, that is what I've kind of highlighted out of verse 1. Any questions, thoughts, comments, anything before we get into the meat of this chapter? Mm-hmm. Potentially. I'll give you that, especially with who we have in the frame here. It may be a good bit directed towards that time period. Like I said, I feel like the mention of them, there is overlap between all three probably, because, that's one thing. We have this all compiled down into nice, neat chapters where we can read through it in just a little bit. May not have originally been delivered that way. May have been a series of messages that we now have as the document we know as Micah. But it is something to notice the kings you have here and, how that sets that backdrop, right? Because something we covered last time, the minor prophets as a whole, it's just a terrible time period for faithfulness to God because, that's the whole issue, hence why they're here. But any other comments on verse 1 of chapter 1? All right. If not, let's get into the meat of this thing. We're going to be in chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. That's where we'll be next. So, who wants to take those? Verses 2 through 4. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hear you peoples, all of you. Pay attention, O earth, and all that is in it. Let the Lord God be a witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. For behold, the Lord is coming out of his place. He will come down, tread upon the high places of the earth, and the mountains will melt under him. The valleys will split open like wax before the fire. The waters pour down a steam place.
Well, as we begin into what we would consider more the content of Micah, there's just some things here I want to note, because some of the language he uses here is interesting. Some of the references and images he's painting are very interesting. First, we see this portrayal of God as this warrior coming down to destroy the earth, it seems. He's going to trample everything. He's just stomping and things are being destroyed. But it's this picture of him as a warrior. And that is something I think we need to highlight, because this has been a pretty consistent picture, I would say, throughout the minor prophets and your Old Testament even. Because, I told you we'd get back to Exodus 15. Let's take a look there for just a moment. Go over with me to Exodus 15. And so, context here, the people have just fled Egypt, right? This is like this moment Israel seems truly established in a sense, right? They are free from their bondage to Egypt. They are a nation solely in covenant with the one God. And the first thing they do is sing praise unto him. And I want to highlight something here, some of the language they use. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my Father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. Here we get at what seems to be the birth of a nation. Well, the God they follow is a warrior who's just crushed an army before them. And that's how they highlight him at the beginning. Ms. Garrett? Well, yeah, I will definitely say this on that. Apocryphal language is difficult at times. I mean, how many times have somebody go, yeah, I understand Revelation down to the detail perfectly, because that is like the chief example we see. No, it's difficult. It has its nuances. And to nuance some of the things you said there, at least how I view these things, when it's talking heavens and earth and things like this, I think what he's really calling is all creation's going to bear witness to this. I mean, think about it. Creation's still bearing witness to what he's done in these moments, right? That's what we've done here today. We're bearing witness to what happened then. No, we are not laying our eyes on it, but we're still looking at this. Because, and actually, it's part of invitation tonight, but your biblical text is really in a lot of ways just God acting in the world, and we're getting snapshots of those moments. I mean, think about it. We referenced Exodus 15 here. If there's a snapshot of a moment I wish I could see, it's the Exodus. And so I'm not saying every instance is simply all of creation bear witness, but in a lot of cases, I think that's what it is. He's calling witnesses. Well, that's not what I'm, I guess, advocating for. I'm not literally talking heaven and earth, but what I'm saying is the order of things that God has established, all of it, spiritual, physical, whatever it is, in any given reference, that's what he's calling to. We can't parse it all out. We just can't, because we're not always going to understand every lick of it. But apocryphal language is difficult, and we're not going to get all the details on any given text. One, because we weren't there. I mean, we're reading texts that weren't written to us or weren't originally delivered to us. We're missing some context I wish we had, because, well, we're not people in Judah or Israel standing there hearing Micah. And like I said, we're just going to miss some of this. Not because we just don't know, but because we just don't know. We can't know things we weren't there for. But we can try our best. We can work through the text, and we can see what we can glean from it. So, anything else? Okay. Well, Exodus 15, I think, is a big backdrop here. This warrior image of God. And not unlike some of our other minor prophets. Primarily, think of two passages here. Joel 3. We won't read all of Joel 3 right now. One, because we've covered it in the past. Two, because we are focusing on Micah. But we will roll over to Amos chapter 9 real quick. Amos chapter 9. This one's relatively quick in comparison to Joel 3. But if you remember, this is right here towards the end-ish of Amos. And this is a vision of judgment. And this is God standing beside the altar, and I want you to notice the way he's described. Amos 9, starting in verse 1. I saw the Lord standing beside the altar, and he said, strike the capitals of the pillars, so that the thresholds shake, knock them down on the heads of all the people. Then I will kill the rest with the sword. None of those who flee will get away, none of the fugitives will escape. If they dig down to Sheol, from there my hand will take them. If they climb up to heaven, from there I will bring them. If they hide on the top of the camel, there I will track them down and seize them, and conceal themselves from my sight on the sea floor. From there I will command the sea serpent to bite them. And if they are driven by their enemies into captivity, from there I will command the sword to kill them. I will keep my eye on them for harm and for good. The Lord, the God of armies, he touches the earth. It melts. All who dwell will mourn. All of it rises like the Nile and subsides like the Nile of Egypt. He builds his upper chambers in the heavens. He lays the foundations of his vault on the earth. He summons the water of the sea and pours it out over the surface of the earth. The Lord is his name. This, I think, is very similar language here being used by Amos as Micah uses here. And you get a very similar description. There's sword, and well, the Lord of armies is his name. I mean, it's a warrior image. Yes, there's some more nuance here as far as, he's standing beside the altar. Obviously, there's a sacrifice piece here as well. But the language as far as how God is being described as this warrior figure is similar. So, anything on that piece of this before we move on? Okay. Second thing I want to note here about these verses is how God is described in another sense. God here is being brought forth almost as a witness, right? He's coming down, he's coming to trample all of these things. But right there in verse 2, the Lord God will be a witness. He's bearing witness to something they've done. And this, I think, is a common theme through Micah, because Micah will have some focuses. It's particularly when we get to chapter 2, we'll really start to see some of these. But Micah has this focus on justice. And a lot at the social level, how the ones up top, the leaders of the people, have treated those below them. And I think here we're starting to get that courtroom scene that we get out of Micah really being painted, and in the following verses we'll see it develop a little more. And a lot of times this is not necessarily just right in your face like this. Sometimes it's subtle. But right here, he's called a witness. He's bearing witness to something, Israel and Judah have done. So, anything else on verses 2 through 4? Okay. Well, this will bring us into our next set of verses, verses 5 through 7. Can somebody read those for me?
All this is for the transgression of Jacob and for the sins of the house of Israel. What is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? And what are the high places of Judah? Are they not Jerusalem? Therefore I'll make Samaria a heap of ruins in the field, places for planting a vineyard. I'll pour down her stones into the valley, and I'll uncover her foundations. All her carved images shall be beaten to pieces, and all her pay as a harlot shall be burned with fire. All her idols I will lay desolate, for she gathered it from the pay of a harlot, and they shall return to the pay of a harlot.
Okay. So, a little bit more development in our courtroom scene. Because God here is not just a witness, He is the judge. He's going to come to judge, well, whoever He is bearing witness to. This case makes it pretty clear. It's Judah, Samaria, Israel, Judah. Okay. So, those are who He's judging, right? That comes out pretty quick in the text. And here's my question for you. What position is this group in? Like, how do you think this trial is going to go? Yeah, they already seem to be convicted. I don't know if y'all could tell, Jeff gave one at and that's one way to put it. I just put it simply as rebellion and sin. Probably not the best position to be in with God as judge and witness in a trial such as this. Then, as you get into 6 and 7, we get another place that God's going to be in. He's also going to be the one to execute, or the executioner in this sense of our courtroom scene. So, He's going to execute His judgment on Samaria, the capital of Israel. And as we get into the next set of verses, we'll see this is going to be a mortal blow. This is, I think, where we need to remember our backdrop here. It's come up a little bit tonight, right? We're not quite to Babylon just yet. We're still in Assyria. And what does Assyria do to Israel? Yeah, they scatter them. Exile. An exile in which the nation will never be the nation it was again, right? This is the diaspora, essentially. And, well, here we see it. The mortal blow is being struck because God has borne witness to their sin and rebellion. He has judged it, and now it's time for the execution. Judgment has come. So, a couple other things to highlight here real quick. Verse 7, we get this discussion of, prostitution or harlotry, depends on the translation you're reading. What minor prophet does that sound like? Ezekiel, but as far as our minor prophets discussion, Hosea, right? That's the opening of your minor prophets. Hosea and Gomer. And here it comes up again. This is a repeated image. This isn't something necessarily, as you brought out, unique to the minor prophets, but like I said, it's like the fundamental image Hosea opens up with. And as you're reading these in the order we have them, it's one of the first images you get out of this group of text is, Israel and Judah have been, prostitutes basically. And here we are. They're being judged for it. Garrett.
I would not read these out. If you really want to know what God thinks of all this, then you need to read Ezekiel chapter 16 and Ezekiel chapter 23. He does not hold back on his language, how these people have acted, and what he thinks of them, and what he thinks of people who turn against him.
You bring up an interesting thought here. And it brings to mind a quote from a professor I had in college. But so you're right, especially in Ezekiel, in those couple of chapters, God does not hold back on the language he uses to describe these acts, how He feels, how He's been treated. And it brings to mind this quote, and some of you may find this humorous, some of you may not. But if your Bible was a movie, your parents wouldn't let you watch it. That is simply the truth. As some of you in here with parents tonight, I'll leave those comments aside, but it is the truth. This is not pretty. This is as ugly gets. I mean, Guys, this is the nation that in Judges 19 takes somebody, chops them up, shoots them all over the place, and starts a civil war. I mean, these are the people who have slaughtered each other. And think of what they have done to other nations, other people. And then their behavior towards the God who saved them in that chapter we just read, Exodus 15. Think about it. Exodus 15 is this great high point, right? They have been saved from Egypt. They have become slaves no more. They are saved from all the oppression they were under. And they've praised God for who he is. And here we get all this time later. And this is the people they've become. Described as, well, a harlot, a prostitute. And judgment's now coming. How they have fallen. Oh, how they have become idolaters. Oh, how they have left their God. Any other thoughts? Anything on this?
Bring it home to ourselves, and go to Hebrews, it says, if they receive the just recompense of reward, how much greater punishment do we deserve if we turn against Christ? I'm paraphrasing here. This is what God ought to be at them, and that's physically what he did to them. I mean, if we can spiritually bring it up to our time, God did that with them. And they didn't have a full revelation. We now have it. How much sore punishment do we deserve if we turn against God and against Christ? If we neglect so great a salvation.
You bring a good point up. Because one, we have more. All right. And it's an interesting concept here. How much of a different position we're in. No, are we this nation state that Israel was? Did we have God as king essentially at one point? All these things. No. We're in a completely different position, but a position all the more. A position that, as you highlight, Hebrews makes clear, like, since we're in a worse position than them as far as judgment. So now we have Christ. We truly know the fullness of salvation. And this brings to mind for me an interesting thought here as far as how we look at the Old Testament and then in light of the New. Because sometimes I feel like, because it's easy, we want to like rag on Israel, rag on Judah, because like look at all the terrible stuff they did. Man, I didn't do all that stuff in Judges 19. Okay, but you're missing the point if you do that. The whole point here is, look what they did, not just the act itself, the sin piece, what their sin specifically was. If that's all you're looking at, you're missing the point. Because guess what? I don't think anybody, at least I hope not, has murdered anybody in at least nobody in this room has, right? Okay, good. Just checking. But we've all sinned. We've all looked God in the face basically and said, get away from me. I don't need you. That's what fundamentally Israel and Judah have done here. They've turned to themselves, their own desires, and now they've incurred judgment. That's what you need to see here. Though the sin is not the same, sin is still sin, all the same. See, it's the attitudes, the perspectives, the mentalities that Israel and Judah came with that are the issue. It's not just the individual sin, because in that sense, all sin is the same, right? It may not all be the same in its consequence or how it plays out, but its effect is. And this is what the problem. These people have turned this into a lifestyle. I mean, as we get into chapter 2, man, this is just getting bad. But here we see God has made his judgment. He's made his call. Ball is a ball and a strike is a strike. They've turned from him. The strike has been thrown. They are out of here. So, anything else on this chunk before we...
I couldn't remember exactly what verse was. It's in Hebrews 10, verses 26 through 31. Covers all that.
Hebrews 10. Okay, yeah. Hebrews 10, yeah. That's, if you didn't hear, that's what Miss Garrett was referring to a minute ago with the greater judgment incurred in the revelation that we now have in Christ. That's going to be Hebrews 10. But any other comments, thoughts, questions, concerns even, before we bump on? All right. Well, we're going to hit our next chunk of verses here, and it's going to be verses 8 and 9. Now, I will say there is a shift in the text here as far as our perspective changes just a touch. So, who wants to tackle these couple verses before, we start talking about them? Who wants to read these? So, we get a transition here because we seem to get Micah's perspective, right? And his reaction to this news. And what is that reaction? Sorrow? Mourning? I mean, he describes it as these utteral, just animal-like yelling and wailing and mourning. I mean, have y'all ever heard a dog get kicked? Right? Have you ever closed a door on a cat's tail? Have you ever heard a bird screech in this awful way like a chicken does, like in my front yard? Yeah, that is what Micah's describing this as. This is just animalistic in a sense. And he's tearing his clothing because of what he's seen and what's coming to Samaria, and it's even getting to Judah. And he doesn't know what else to do. He has seen what's coming, and he can do nothing but mourn. It is visceral in a sense, and it should be. One thing I'm big about is we can't just always read our biblical text like textbooks. We can't. You have to see the emotion in this and how these people feel in those moments. As high and as mighty and as powerful as we should sing the praises of Exodus 15, we should feel the depth and the weight of Micah 1, 8, and 9. Because it's what he felt as he sees this. And this is how you should feel when you see people walk away. When you see people willfully reject the will of God. Guys, this is how we should feel for the lost sinner. This is the feeling you should feel when you're, seeing somebody willfully reject Christ and you're trying to bring them in. It should hurt. It should cause lament. And it should all be more the motivator to turn the situation around. Because, we'll get into it. Micah has a very distinct structure. We'll get a couple chapters of, judgment, doom, and gloom, and sorrow, it seems, and right there at the end, boom, we'll turn it around. It's going to be a while before we get there, but that's what we'll see. Now, we will start to tackle the next set of verses here in a moment. I realize this time I only have a few minutes left, but any thoughts, anything before we kind of start these? Okay, I'll read this section because there's a particular something I want to highlight. But, so Micah chapter 1, verses 10 through 15. Don't announce it in Gath. Don't weep at all. Roll in the dust of Bel-Lethara. Depart in shameful nakedness, you residents of Saphir. The residents of Zahon will not come out. Beth-Ezel is lamenting. Its support is taken from you. Though the residents of Marath anxiously wait for something good, disaster has come from the Lord to the gate of Jerusalem. Harness the horses to the chariot, you residents of Lachish. This was the beginning of sin for daughter Zion, because Israel's acts of rebellion can be traced to you. Therefore, send farewell gifts to Moresheth Gath. The houses of Akzib are a deception to the kings of Israel. I will again bring a conqueror against you who will live in Marashah. The nobility of Israel will come to Adullam. Okay, lots of stuff here. We probably won't finish this. Deciding on how we want to tackle this for just a second. I'm going to go out of order on my slides for just a moment because I want to highlight this. If you've done any reading on this passage ahead of time, maybe any commentary study, anything kind of article on it, it's probably going to highlight one thing and one thing primarily. There is something here we just don't get in English. This is essentially, let me scroll to it. Yep. This is a section essentially making puns or, wordplay based off of, the Hebrew and what these town names mean. I actually brought something to kind of highlight it, and I'll read it. This is a commentary on the Minor Prophets, but actually what I'm reading is something it's citing out of another commentary, and I'll give you that here at the end. But let me read this to you, and hopefully it helps kind of get the point here across. So, starting there in verse 10. In Gath, tell town, tell it not. In Akko, weep town, weep not. In Bel-eth Aphara, dust town, roll thyself in dust. Pass by, thou inhabitress of Saphir, fair town, in nakedness and shame. The citizen of Zanan, march town, march not forth. The morning of Beth-ezel, neighbor town, taketh from you its standing place. The inhabitress of Marath, bitter town, is trivial about good, because evil hath come down from Jehovah to the gate of Jerusalem. Bind the chariot to the swift horse, thou inhabitress, as you can tell I cannot say that well, to Lachish horse town. She was the beginning of sin for the daughter of Zion, for the transgressions of Israel were found in thee. Therefore thou, O Zion, give dismissal, farewell presents to the Moresheth Gath, the possession of Gath. The houses of Askizim, fall spring, become Askab, a disappointing brook to Israel's kings. And we'll stop there for the moment, mostly because I'm butchering some of that. And two, that gets the main point here across. That's coming from F.W. Farrar's commentary on the Minor Prophets. It's pages 130 and 130 and 131. I hope that gets it across. If it didn't, I'll show it to you. But this is something interesting, and this is, I think, at times things we miss, and I wish everybody could just read Greek and Hebrew. That would make things a lot simpler sometimes. But we miss it if you're reading it in English. But like I said, I think it's interesting how God's doing this. He takes time to really, we all have that song that's stuck in our head, right, sometimes? Or sometimes somebody sings some stinking jingle, and then it's stuck in your head all day. Well, think of how this would hit you, though, in the moment. You're hearing this aloud, and it catches your attention, which is the whole point. Like I said, we don't quite get it in English, sadly, but we do see the point. This is meant to be a device to, grab the people, have them understand. And it plays an interesting thought in how all this is going to be reversed. But I just wanted to highlight that real quick. We won't be done with these verses just yet, but I guess I'm out of time. So, thank y'all, and we'll be back in Micah 1 next week.